All right, everybody. I'm back in San Francisco post E3. I have healed somewhat with the voice here, but there was some nerd flu going around that I think got me. So if I do sound a little raspy, apologies. This is the result of working too many hours in the company of far too many people. So E3, a lot came out of it, and I still think kind of, I think a lot of you guys were very impressed with a lot of the games that were shown. But that whole thing about the consoles really seemed to be more preeminent in everyone's mind. I have to say, even on the press side, it turned into a far sexier story on Monday than I had ever anticipated. And at least for a moment there at the Sony press conference, I kind of devolved into a giddy like, ooh, this is quite fun. In the cold light of day, things seem to be a lot different than how they played out. And I'll address those specifics, but I think you guys are very, very aware of it, that Sony's bold move that was very clear on messaging also masked things that would put at least certain elements of the PlayStation 4 more in line with the Xbox One than they would have had you believe with, once again, a very confident presentation that they had the Monday of E3. But my sense coming from that is I wouldn't recommend to anyone to pre-order a console now. That everything hasn't been detailed. And if you are pre-ordering, you're kind of buying a story. You're really not buying the console because the clarity on that isn't out. And that story, I talk a lot about narrative in games and how we kind of, read things through certain prisms. There's a word of the moment. I think that you need to bear in mind Microsoft and Sony are also selling a story. They're selling a lifestyle. They're selling a device. And right now, Sony seems to be selling one that is a little bit more compelling to a lot of the audience out there. But stories, they're rhetoric. I don't want to say they're deceit, but they are rhetoric, and they're meant to make you feel a particular way that doesn't necessarily bear out what the actuality is. In contrast, I think Microsoft is selling a very bad story, one that people don't feel like reading or experiencing, but at the same time, it may also be obscuring something far more interesting, something far more compelling. I'm not saying that's necessarily the point, because yes, the DRM issue is there, the used game issue is there, but let's bear in mind, Sony may be inviting the exact same used game issue, and that, I don't know, they're more explicit about no DRM at the launch of the game, but the thing is, there really is an interest among many people in the game industry to reduce the sale of used games and to definitely keep a cap on piracy. And there's different ways that you can tell that same story to the consumer audience out there. And I think, I got caught up in it myself. It's like, ooh, Sony, who was the underdog last generation, they kind of punched back. And that's the sexier story, not the guys that did really, really well last generation are going to continue to do so. And it's so seductive. And I think myself and the press can get caught up a little bit in that. And you guys, for many good reasons, will get caught up in that as well. And I think that does obscure a lot of the stuff that happens in the video game industry as a whole. I see it all the time in the comment sections, that something has to be better than something else, that something is always in competition. For all the years I worked in television, some would say, yeah, but try to turn this into a debate, even if a debate probably wasn't the most reasonable way to have a discussion. That we get so addicted to the way that these things play out that we don't sit down and deal with the far more boring thing. And that's the facts, of which I don't think there are enough yet. On that notion of story, and it's something I've become so much more acutely aware of since I started here at Rev3 Games and watching comment sections on YouTube or stuff that's on Reddit or stuff that's on NeoGAF, that there is such a gravitation towards story, and that something that is laid out cannot be exactly what it is, and there is somehow subtext. I don't think that speaks to a paranoid culture, but I think it does speak to the need of us to sort of find interest in things and find a way of explaining it to the other people around us. And this affected me personally when I was at the booth losing my voice and trying to fight some very loud DJ music that I don't think was made apparent to you guys because the mics we were using were so good that somehow I was under the influence of something when I was doing interviews at the later part of the day. Unfortunately, I hate to tell you, I was really tired and losing my voice. And it was kind of a humorous thing that became a little bit sad over time because I was just trying to fight and struggle and get all that stuff out, and it became, nothing more than a joke. Anyway, it was one of my learning experiences, and obviously with an eye towards E3, we might even open up those mics more so you guys can hear exactly what the environment is around us. And yes, it takes a lot of endurance that this old gamer body is suddenly realizing it may not be able to accommodate. All right, obviously it was hard to find any questions that weren't sort of E3 questions. I think we've covered that so much. I wanted to address something, and this popped up a couple of times. I may have even responded to it, but the fact that our Last of Us review came out so far ahead of the game. And why does that happen? Once again, does that have any deeper meaning? I think in this instance, Sony, and this happens with all game companies, they send us a copy of the game, and then they say, hey, if you can hold footage until this particular date. And that is kind of a generally agreed upon thing, because if you do violate that, you tend to damage your relationship with the game company. And of course, we really like to do our reviews. We like to have them up in a timely fashion. Also, we don't want to hold our review until after everyone else has that come up because, well, that's a bad business decision. So there really is nothing nefarious or noxious. I believe in the case of Sony, and I think very reasonably so, they had a very good game, and the attention on how good that game would be might get a little masked in all the E3 news and all the E3 coverage that was out there. This happened before without an E3 for Uncharted 2. It's something they like to do. It is a demonstration, I think, of confidence in your game that you can have that many reviews sit out there, you know, in the internet for a week or two. It is obviously at their disposal. I've never found it to be too noxious. Where I do find it to be that way is where they try to hold our reviews until after it's been made available at retail somewhere else on Earth. I'm not going to name the companies that are doing that, but that's where you feel that hand that's restrictive, and that definitely does get the prickles up. Okay, guys, let's get back on track with all the questions. Put them down below. I will do what I can to answer them. Also, bear in mind, we are doing Address the SES this week. That is going to be this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. I will be fielding all the questions you can come up with about things that happened at E3. I hope to have answers for almost all of them, but it should be a very fun and exciting one. Hope to see you there. All right, nap time.